Everything else, over there. Yeah.
All right, we're being recorded and we are live. Brad, did we get the mute turned on? Anyways, I'll call the May 16th, 2023 work session. Sherwood City Council session here. We have a couple items on the agenda for a work session tonight. The first one is going over our 5-year capital improvement plan. I'm assuming we'll just pick that right over to Craig.
So a couple weeks ago, we were here, we went over the 1-year plan. We didn't get a lot of time to talk about the 5-year plan. And so you guys had some time to look at it, maybe talk about it. Pretty much you have projects laid out from actual capital engineering projects to maintenance projects in this plan. Your traffic calming actually comes out of your street maintenance funds, but it is in this plan as well. And there's some projects on here that are county projects, but they're on here so we can actually try to get funding. There's an opportunity such as EV. There's projects on here we don't have funds also. That's the reason why they're on here. So there's some parks projects on here. This was taken out of the Parks Master Plan. And really that's continuing waters, sanitary storm. As I mentioned in our last meeting, the sanitary fund is not very good condition to be able to fund all these. We're going to have problems funding the project, probably, so it's not a share of that. As well as there's a couple of projects in Schaumburg, talking about
So just a quick note on Senator, I did find out from our consultant that Wyden and Merkley both submitted our 2 sewer projects for downtown. I think it's around $2.something million. So it's submitted, but it's not finalized. So we should know more in August and whether it's going to be final on the list. But that's a good sign. That's the first step.
So Schaumburg is about $500,000 for their portion of that project, which you saw in the year. So really, that's the most important of the CIP. Any questions on the projects? We went through a lot of stuff.
I just wanted to bring up more of a discussion point with council around University Accessible Destination Play Area, top of page 7. Just kind of some information that came out after the last park board meeting. So, just a little history here. When the Parks Board was hearing alternatives on redoing the Woodhaven Park play structure, which is currently under construction, the idea came through the community of having like a fully accessible play structure. Instead of like most of the playgrounds we build, I think have like some portion of the structure being accessible, but there was a kind of a desire on some members of the community to have a structure that's completely accessible. I think the initial estimates at the time were just back of the napkin things that might like double the cost of the project. I think your team has come back and said, actually, it's more likely to 5x or 6x the project. It's almost a $2 million project. And so after the Parks Board meeting, I talked to Kristen and I think we kind of brainstormed it together and thought, because whatever city builds this kind of thing, it's going to become a destination, a regional destination for people from cities from all over Metro and the county and the area. So it seems to me like there's an opportunity to either work with Metro, work with the county, work with other cities, or some combination of the above to fund. Like, I don't think one city should build and fund something like this. It becomes a resource that gets used, by people from all over the region. It seems like maybe that's something Metro might want to get involved in, or the county. So that was my only thought there is, how do we, obviously it's several years down the road in our budget, but I'd like to see us working with partners to figure something out there versus funding it ourselves on behalf of all the cities in the region. I think it's a good idea. I think it's needed.
Is there ever such a thing where cities have old resources for a amenity in one particular town?
I don't know, I mean, but to me, it could just be Metro building
Yeah.
themselves, right, or the county or somebody, like, it doesn't even have to be in Truett necessarily, it's adjacent, right?
I'm not aware here, but I have seen it when I was in Kansas. I saw regional area, and so it's the Kansas City side of Kansas City, Missouri, the Johnson County area where cities pool resources for things like this. So I think there's models out there to look at. I'm not aware of any here, but I do know that out there for a regional park. Being used. It's a great idea.
Structures that the citizens pointed out, just looking at. There was quite a bit of donations for those parks.
Oh.
So it wasn't all the state's money.
That's another thing.
We say between donations and grants, you know, it feels like there's, and so part of it is, right, is this an opportunity for the Parks Department to form a subcommittee to say, hey, what kind of grants are available and, you know, how do we go after them and stuff like that. My parents have a fully accessible one in California, the one next to them that is, like you say, it's a big draw from all around. I'd be happy to look into that, see how it's funded, but, you know, I think grants and donations, especially with the, you know, the big local businesses that have moved in and may be willing to write checks and. So,
I guess.
I should say donation fundraising.
Yeah.
yeah, even matching funds or, you know, something like that. Would make sense to know. That, do parks, do they have subcommittees? I don't know. Okay.
I think the only subcommittee we have is traffic.
Okay.
I listen to that's great ideas.
Any other
So
comments on that?
I have a comment, oh, not on that. So all the ones that are blank until 28, 29 in future, those are essentially unfunded, right? Okay,
And they're unfunded, clear out there, such as Sherwood West, the 38 sports complex. They're just on the list in case there's an opportunity.
magic bucket of money that shows up.
Wait, is stuff that has a fiscal year attached to it, is that theoretically funded, or is that just, okay, that's not funded, so none of it's funded. I'll put it per year.
Oh,
So you gotta go back to your 1 year. That's what's-
Okay,
And there could be projects in here that's over multiple years that's funded, such as the bridge project, ICH Drive, so the stuff is.
So on the page 2 of 8, very top of the pedestrian crossing study. There's-
So that is a study that we're actually trying to get traffic calming. So that is pretty much from highway to street crossing is. What I think could come out of that is you cut it down from 99 to lane. It's 2 lanes. You could see something, the recommendation that comes out of that is to pull traffic over to 1 lane and use the right turn to get out of the lane. So you don't have 2 lanes turning into the crosswalks. Yeah, I don't know that, but that's what I would think one of the options could be. To strike that so you're moving traffic over into the 1 lane. So instead of back when we turn to go. That's what- So, it's close. Right. Yeah, right. Yeah. So that might be one thing that comes out of that study. But we're trying to.
That was because of all the people scrambling to go on that outside lane, accelerate, go right on.
Crosswalk process.
I mean, heard of a lot of people on those crossings.
Yeah, and they keep speeding, you know, it's a triple lane. The kids crossing because people don't see that there's a school there. They don't realize intuitively that the school zone.
So there'll probably be a few recommendations that come out of that.
Just a note on the E road, the 7 point, or is that? Yeah, 7.9 million, so that's So right now we have that as a MISTIP ask through the county. For those who are not aware, MISTIP is I can't remember what it stands for, but back long time ago in the nineties, they passed a levy in the county to raise transportation dollars for projects. And the WCCC, Washington County Coordinating Committee, which is made up of Washington County mayors, basically recommends which projects are going to get worked on each year. Measure 50 passed. They they rolled that into the county's property tax rate because that way they didn't have to go out every 5 years for additional money or to renew it every 5 years as a levy. The county has up until this year honored that. Let's go into the general fund. That portion was held aside on transportation projects. This year, because of the county's budget problems, right now they're planning on taking 7%. That, so all of this planning has gone on so far is on hold. We see what the county does. There's been some rumors that there's some on the board that want to take like 40%. And so that's a conversation the mayors are having with the county right now. Our position has been that we need to honor the intent of the voters back in the 90s when they passed that levy for transportation. But I just,
Major systems, transportation improvement projects.
You're right.
so anyways, it just seemed like a good point just to update everybody. I don't know if you heard that. Yeah.
Is, are we asking for the,
That
Or
seven
20.
point nine was for the way that Mystic had worked is all the money for that cycle is divided up between the different districts and the 5 cities in the Washington district had 3 years with fires. We have that all worked out what's happening, so it's all right now. So this would be more pass along.
We also in here put in a restroom at the skate park, so YMCA. They have to walk over. It's in all year that we actually. So everyone was the restroom for the PUD.
all the promises?
They're moving a lot of dirt over there now.
Any other questions?
For the tannery site cleanup.
Yeah.
At this point, how confident are we that it'll be cleaned up by the 20?
In our SDC, when we said to the SDCs this last time, we're going to be building, but it's there, so.
Okay.
we're actually, some people that help us with some stuff. Trying to obtain that and be able to apply for Brownsfield.
So we did ask our federal team for an earmark for that for 2.1 million, and that was submitted as well. 2.5 million, that was submitted as well. The normal program you would submit it is heavily oversubscribed at the federal level, so they're trying to sneak it in another program that's heavily subscribed that has done before. So cross our fingers. It's kind of-
I should say that funding for the facility is a big deal and cleanup will be a big deal. Sure. As far as the design of the actual facility, we've already got a feasibility study done on that, so we can move right into the next phase of design. Part of the law, so we got some stuff. But we still got to go through 30, 60, 90% design, so you're looking, once we can figure out, we get cleaned up. The funding portion of that is.
I was seeing brownfields are like buying old houses. You're renovating, until you get in there to start,
It's got to be done before.
Wells Walton, original director left here, they left and they opened the facility right after.
No.
So they had it ready. They had it ready. They had it ready. I think they brought him back for a few days. So, any other questions on this? You'll see it at the, this 16 for approval. For the resolution.
It's good.
Are we good?
I'm good.
Awesome, thank you so much, great, appreciate it. All right, we're 15 minutes ahead of schedule. And All right, so next, we're going to have our city council and planning commission joint work session. And we have our planning commission chair here, so we can want to jointly lead.
I'll just ride your coattails and let you, but maybe we could do introductions around the table.
I think that would be great.
Start taking a little more mountains.
We know if everyone's going on the study commissions.
Yeah.
Do you want I thought we haven't.
Teresa couldn't come tonight. Teresa and Corey Capo couldn't make it.
And so we're missing Commissioner Wydalla.
He said he was.
Okay, so we got all the commissioners here.
Yep.
Anyone with the table? Bruce, come on.
Come on up there.
Eric, come on, let's sit up here.
No.
Yeah, I feel alone over
Bill,
here.
Bill, see.
All right, so welcome to the joint session and Jeannie suggests we do introductions, which I think is important, so I'm Eric.
Need a name, you just.
Yeah.
Name?
Oh, Tim Roser, sorry. Big pleasure.
Council.
Justin Kai, Planning Commission. Tyler Barnes, Planning Commission.
Doug Scott, council.
Bruce Coleman, Economic Development Manager, City of Sherwood.
Eric Rutledge, Community Development Director for the city. Jane Simpson, Planning Commission.
And Erica Palmer, Planning Manager.
Dan Vance, planning commission.
Taylor Giles, former planning commission, current city councilor.
There you go. Dan Stankey, city councilor.
Keith Campbell, city manager.
Awesome, thank you. So I guess, Erica, are you leading us through this today?
Yes. I'm gonna lead you through the concept plan here. Well,
Awesome.
not all through the concept plan, but we'll get there.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. Tonight I am here to give an update on the Sherwood West concept plan as the project begins to wrap up. At the last work session with council and the commission last year, we had reviewed the following. We reviewed the purpose of the relook project, the concept themes, the 6 themes that we have, the assumptions for buildable lands and open space, and then the residential land use designations and densities that we're using in the plan itself. And because we're short on time this evening, I'm not gonna rehash all of that. I know that you were all sent the concept plan to review and it talks all about that information. So I'm gonna dive into what's new. So this evening, I'm going to review and discuss the land use and transportation maps in the plan and how they were developed. I'm going to go over the housing metrics, job metrics, future implementation strategies, coupled with the funding tools and next steps for this project. So last June, the CAC had a meeting to develop some different concept plans. So our CAC, which is comprised of about 14 members of the community, put them into 3 different groups. Based on the buildable land within the Sherwood West area, we gave them chips to all play with. Housing chips, employment chips, park chips, where they could place them on a map of Sherwood West, kind of develop an overall land use pattern for the area. And so this slide actually shows the 3 concept plans that were developed through the CAC process. All of them are very similar. A couple of things that stand out were like differences in placements for open space and a little bit of the mixed use and hospitality zone that we're calling it, and I'll go over that in just a little bit here, and some of the residential housing. But overall, there's not a lot of differences on these 3 maps.
Hey, Erica, are we muted? I don't know if we're supposed to be broadcasting muted.
I think we're unmuted on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is that right, Brad?
Yeah, that's my laptop.
Okay.
perfect. All right. And then we kind of developed some concepts for transportation in the plan document itself. We know that the CAC carried over the recommendation from the original concept plan in 2016 that the preferred approach is to reroute Elbert. And then the CAC wanted to know about a new north-south kind of connector road in the area, based on growth in Yamhill County and, different, to help relieve, the traffic congestion on Elbert itself. And so we took the 3 maps and kind of our traffic themes to an open house last November for the public to review, and we did a survey. We talked to folks at the open house, got their feedback, and basically we really heard that the design and safety of Elbert is really important. The preservation of natural features is important. We need to be planning for parks and trails. People like the variety of housing that was in the overall plan. They really enjoyed the cottage cluster kind of zoning designation that we had, and we heard that throughout the comprehensive planning process. So we've just carried that over into this plan document. Folks really like the mix of uses close to Highway 99. And then we also heard some concerns about that north-south connector road because of the topography, cost, and just overall location. So now I'm gonna get to the final draft concept plan maps themselves. So in the document, we show the existing transportation network, and that is the little diagram to the left. Those are our current streets within the planning area, and then the figure to the right shows existing streets, proposed streets, and that black dashed lines, and then we show streets that we need some further study on. And that includes the rerouting of Elbert that we have to do an alternatives analysis on to get more information on whether it should go straight or if we should reroute it. And then also that north-south connector through the plan area that utilizes or might utilize that Eastview Road. And the CAC really had a lot of conversation about that north-south connector road, and their recommendation was actually to pull it off the overall transportation map and just talk about it in that last slide and in text in the document, because it does need further study, and we will be studying it down the road. And that area of Sherwood West is probably one of the last areas to develop in the overall area through the planning, through the build out period for Sherwood West, because it's that western edge there. So you can see here on this map, we show all the neighborhoods, planned neighborhood streets. We do show the preferred alternative of the rerouting of Elbert, because that was the preferred option from the CAC. And when we talk about the streets in the plan,
So the preferred routing is where it stops there, goes over there, then comes back?
Here. So the preferred route is kind of,
It
see
just
if I can
doesn't,
get my pen here to highlight. Actually, let's use the laser pointer. Right through here.
okay.
Some of the initial study work showed that it's actually, to improve that road and go straight, it's pretty expensive because of all the low area there.
You'd have to build,
Yeah.
potentially build
A bridge.
a bridge or an overcrossing because of the topography.
But that's some of the work that needs to be done, is to do that kind of alternatives analysis to get a better feeling of the costs and
Yeah.
opportunities for both options.
Yeah, I think one of the other reasons driving the preference for the rerouting is just overall slowdown of traffic and reducing cut through trips and stuff.
Right, but it seems like doing that rerouting would increase the need for that conceptual street down, that would potentially cut down the side of Sherwood West, right?
And that's topography.
Potentially.
Potentially.
Okay, but I mean, those people who all drive to Hillsborough for jobs, they're they're not gonna not go down it because it now goes in an angle.
Or they just go down 99 to Roy Road, is what they should, once it's.
Oh, okay. All right.
And the other reason we wanted to put that conceptual idea of another east-west, or is east-west or north-south connector, is we need to get it into the concept plan so we can start having those conversations with the county.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
If we don't put it in there, it's gonna be harder to have that conversation.
Exactly.
Okay.
And really, that road needs to go far beyond Edie. Just connecting it to Edie doesn't really solve the problem.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking it
Yeah.
goes to Shoal Sherwood,
It
maybe.
needs to go all the way up.
Yeah, and so then,
We can't, yeah, so we can't plan for this area in here to connect it to Shoal Sherwood, but things could change in the future. And that's another reason why we kept it.
why can't we?
Urban
It's in the-
reserve.
It's not in the planning area.
Okay.
Yeah, but who knows 10 years from now
Yeah.
what the rules are.
Okay.
So where does Edie come from here? Highway 99 over and then just south,
So
You were-
here's Edie.
other side. Oh, so Edie would still go all the way across?
No.
No.
It would no?
No, it would no longer
Well,
go
so from
across there.
99, it just comes over and then just goes south.
Correct,
on
so
the
from
river.
Edie, it would go down this way and there would be.
You can go
Oh, I
down
see.
there, yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah.
I got it.
That's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you were,
No,
it's
there's
gonna
a
be
little
redirected
tiny-
from down.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
sorry,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, I
really
see.
hard to see on there.
Okay. All right.
I actually brought some bigger poster board if somebody wants to see the plan close up here. So this is the concept for trails and open space within the plan area. We've heard from folks throughout the Sherwood community that plan trails are a top priority. So the trail network, will utilize, sidewalks, streets, easements. It utilizes a gas easement line within the planning area right through here and really connects this area to all of the different natural resources and to the existing Sherwood community in addition to the refuge. So I think, so this little green blob. That is a planned park. It's about 20 acres in size. It'll probably seem bigger than that because it's nestled right into the Chicken Creek Greenway. And within the Chicken Creek Greenway, we have a regional trail proposed that would connect up to the wildlife refuge. And this other just green blob, kind of north of EB, is also another park around 15 to 20 acres in size as well. And the CAC had a lot of conversation about where these park locations should go. Because when you try to get everything on the map, you're squeezing everything in, that's difficult, I think.
Well, at the end of the day too, it comes down to where you actually buy the land.
Right, yeah.
Has the CAC chosen one of the 3 concepts already?
Yes,
Oh, we're not there yet.
yes.
yeah, I think she missed, so in part of the open house, there were 3 sub areas, north, central, south.
Right.
And through the open public forum, there were votes taken and there was voting for option 1 and then.
Yeah, I did the
option one.
online survey, right.
Right, and so option 1 was chosen for 2 areas and then option 2 or 3 for the third. So
Okay.
They took what the online forum said, took the votes from that and took the votes from the open house. That information was fed back to CAC and a blended map was
And
created.
we're gonna get there in just a second.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly right.
Now I understand the process that took place, okay.
Yeah, and there's the map.
All right, so our
Real
land,
quick,
yes.
Gary, just to go back. Also, you can see there's a bunch of smaller green, that's the neighborhood parks, right? So
Yes,
the 2 big ones are like community parks. And then, or not community, community parks, and then the smaller one, there's still lots of other neighborhood parks as well, so I want people to think there's only 2 parks.
so our residential land use designations on the concept map include multifamily cottage cluster, which is its own designation specifically for cottage cluster housing. We have a zone for middle housing, which could be for duplex, townhomes, and cottage clusters. We have the neighborhood medium high, neighborhood medium, and then neighborhood low.
OAR 660 is basically the HB 2001 that passed back in 19.
And on medium high stuff, I mean, that includes both rentals like apartments as well as condo, like homeownership or path to homeownership, right?
Correct.
Perfect.
Apartments. Apartments are multi.
What are
Multi.
multifamily? Oh,
Right.
oh, perfect. Okay. All right.
So then we have our commercial land use designations, it's mixed use employment, commercial, mixed use and hospitality. And this hospitality zone is interesting. It's kind of a carryover from the last plan in 2016, where we talked about Sherwood being a gateway to wine country. And some of those uses that, you know, could carry on that theme, such as utilizing our current wine businesses around the region, having tasting rooms, some farm to table restaurants, some smaller, you know, boutique businesses. And, you know, we've been talking about having a boutique hotel in the area as well.
So can I ask a question, since
Yes.
we're gonna be having the commission hearings? Your council input on a hospitality zone versus a hospitality overlay would be, an overlay allows more flexibility, someone could do what's in the underlying zone and then have an overlay that can,
What would the underlying zone be?
and that would be a good question, because if it's residential, you make it into that, make it into a. I don't know the answer to that, but I just wanted to throw it out to say, is the council leaning towards a hospitality zone?
Yes.
So it's specific, or an overlay so that there's flexibility?
And does the zone allow us taxation and other stuff
Oh, yes.
specific to that zone versus why would we, is it just the flexibility that we would go with an overlay?
Well, here's the challenge. So, for instance, if the underlying zoning is residential, we have a hospitality on top of that. Under HB 2001, and especially 3414, which has a lot of lakes in Salem, a developer could come in and just put residential through the whole thing. Right, so we lose the ability to have that hospitality zone.
Okay.
Additionally, with 3414, that bill right now, as it's written, I'm not exaggerating, says a city shall issue any variance a developer asks for with a few minor exceptions.
In a residential.
In
No, I read that.
residentially zoned. So,
Yeah.
so for instance, if we made the underlying zone, I'm just making this up,
Yeah.
industrial with a overlay, that might work, right? But
then you could add it with industrial.
you can have industrial, so I think having, my
I think
opinion
we're
is,
trying to accomplish is the hospitality.
it needs. I think it
And
needs
if
to be-
nobody builds it, then we can always rezone it later.
Okay, just so when we go through the process and the conversation happens at the commission, we don't go down the wrong path and you guys
It's a
have to
great question.
divert
Yeah.
back, so that helps.
I like that.
Great conversation. So this is the concept land use map here, and I'm just gonna run by it through our 4 kind of planning areas. So in this northern area, we have about 200 acres of employment, of mixed employment, and that is really focusing on our targeted industries for Sherwood that are found in our EOA. So a lot of advanced manufacturing uses. And then down to the bottom here, we have that park, a little bit of multifamily, middle housing, and medium density residential neighborhood. Right down here, kind of existing, that would like match the existing Menlo Farm subdivision just to the
And
south.
for the big pink area, that's Tech Park?
That's Bruce's
That's
playground.
Bruce's Tech Park?
Yes.
Okay, but so,
High-tech equipment.
right.
I think there'd be high-tech equipment in that
So,
area,
yeah,
yes.
my only, yeah, am I able to put lunch places there for all those workers, or do they all have to come into town?
So that is the next step of
Okay.
this planning process will be the comprehensive planning process and kind of the uses and the zoning.
Okay,
That
perfect,
area.
all right.
Yep.
And by the way, that particular area was called out in the CHIPS Act, the governor signed, as potential chip industry.
Oh, yeah, I love that, but I also don't love all those people coming into, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's. You're allowed to, in our zoning, code, you're allowed to build uses that support the primary use, right?
Oh, okay, great.
Certain percentage.
Yeah, a certain percentage of
So we get a food cart.
And then we have the far west area, which is primarily made up of low density residential housing, some cottage clusters, and then just a smidgen of medium density. Then we get to the west district, right in this area. You see the existing Sherwood High School here, down near the intersection of Kruger and Cade Road. And the CAC, I think, all of the 3 maps that the CAC had, put together really showed a mixture of uses within this area. They had a mixed use area right near the high school to support, the high school kids going to lunch, or, parents, needs, that at their football games, there's, something else to do maybe in that area. Surrounded by medium density housing, cottage clusters, and some multi-family as well. So there's kind of a smorgasbord of uses within this western area to really, support the high school. And then we have the Southwest District to the south, adjacent to Highway 99 and Chapman Road. And we already talked about the hospitality zone or designation in this area. And this area also has, multifamily, a mixed use area right at the edge of Kruger and Highway 99. And a small portion of commercial adjacent to Highway 99 as well as this open space for Goose Creek that is existing. On this land use map, we didn't show future schools, such as a future middle school and a future elementary school that is needed. We did coordinate with the school districts, and we know that those 2 schools will be needed later in the planning period as Sherwood West develops. And we don't necessarily, the school district hasn't land banked any land at this time. So we decided just to show the acreage at a scale that would be needed for those 2 uses within the planned area. Last week, we did hold our final CAC meeting. And one of their recommendations on the final map was just putting some extra clarification on the map that these uses are not set in stone. Basically, they could change as a concept, and we're working on some of that language right now.
For a lot of reasons.
Hey, Erica,
Yes.
I know that because I've been driving it, I know there's at least some interest in potentially master planning some of this area. When do we have to go down that road? Like, when does that door close to us? Or when do we have to decide on whether we want a master plan and some or all of Sherwood West? Is that part of this process? Is that in the next phase after we adopt the concept plan? I want to make sure we don't lose that opportunity.
You'll never lose that opportunity. Actually, you can decide to master plan an area at any time.
I think we have to before we bring it into the EGB, in my opinion. Otherwise,
In the city or EGB?
I think once you bring it into EGB, then you lose control of when it comes into the city. So I think you have to do it before you bring it into EGB personally. That people can self-annex anytime they want.
Right, but there's a tool that we discussed at the CAC meeting that some communities use an annexation agreement so that when the development comes in, it comes in under a contract under an annexation agreement, so you're master planning it through the annexation process, if we have that in our code.
Well, we need to do something at that point before we bring it into the EGB.
I think we need to ask.
We can likely require an annexation agreement.
Yes.
Even if they qualify for annexation, they can
Yes.
force an annexation agreement.
Why don't we do that?
I mean, yeah, we set annexation, the city sets the annexation policy, probably needs to be consistent with the state, I assume, but
This
yes.
is something we need to get.
Roll
On this.
Yeah, I mean, Eric and I have already been meeting, we met with Hillsborough, implements annexation agreements, overall, I thought they were a good idea. They had some tips for us, like codify the requirements and the criteria for annexation. But I think that would be a way to, I think, Eric and I are aware that we'd like a little bit more control over when and how, and potentially setting future sort of development expectations as well, kind of what you're
So you
getting at,
could-
so.
So you could bring it into the UGB, but they wouldn't be able to annex or get their zoning until a master plan is
I don't
created.
know.
Even,
Trust that.
so I guess I'm confused.
Been burned so many times.
Like HB 1573 basically said, if you are congruent to 1573, am I getting the bill right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The-
Senate.
SB 1570.
Oh, SB 15, I have the number right. That we couldn't stop them from annexing, and it almost sounds like a contract could stop them.
And I think we'll take a close look at
Yeah,
that.
we can explain that, I can
So,
figure that out later.
there's the criteria.
I see our lawyer making faces here. I think this is a question for him to.
I don't disagree with anything
Okay.
that Eric or Eric says. I think the concern is it hasn't been tested in court.
We're not stopping them, we're
Yeah.
just putting a criteria that they have to
Right, so for
comply
example,
with.
SB 1573, the annexation still has to be consistent with our comp plan, for example. And so, there's detail in the SB 1573 that I think the city can set more expectations for,
I like
even under,
Can we set the expectation that this parcel can't come in unless all these parcels come in at the same time? Because I'm really worried about the piecemeal play, right? And that's why I want a master plan anyway, at least the west and the south portions. I don't care about the far west, the north and the hospitality, I think that'll be fine. But if you take it apart around the high school and the west,
So we don't have
Master
to
plan
have
at all.
like a Murdoch, right, where they piecemeal in.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, they have enough place for the park that they want.
Sidewalks that do this, I
And I think you have to lay all that out in your annexation policies and your development agreement.
Yeah, and I would say, I know,
or we just do a master plan.
yes, I think the key
Yeah.
is,
And
implementation
that's
of.
part of it.
Implementation of the master plan is important as well, because we did have some real teeth in the master plan, and then also implementation, in my opinion, is most important. Murdoch, all the Denali's, we had a master plan, and the developer came in with
But that wasn't a master
well, we had a
Concept
plan. We had an unadopted comprehensive plan.
hence the teeth,
Yeah.
we need the teeth in there as well, but the developer kept saying, look, there's all parcelized, we can't meet the master plan, and that's all wrong. The point of a master plan is for each individual property owner to know what is expected of their property, and it all comes together, even if it's developed separately. But I think the key is
Right,
that
but
we.
that lot by lot, you're designating what can be built on that.
Right, and it comes into, it creates a cohesive plan, and again, the key is that when that first person, or the first two come in, they stick to the plan, the next party sticks to the plan, and the next party sticks to the plan. And in the end, you reach that.
How do you compensate a land owner who gets, so to speak, stuck with,
green block.
on their property? I mean, they have this huge property, they can't do residential because
That's why we go through this process, and yeah, and part of the master planning is, I think it's, that concern is supportive of doing master planning, because we're setting the expectation up front that, like we're doing right now, hey, even through this concept plan, yeah, if you're in this area, you're likely gonna have a requirement for a neighborhood park, yes, the city's gonna come purchase it, but I think that's a better approach than every time a developer comes in, and we're saying, oh, well, now we really need a park, and so this is it.
Yeah.
And so it's setting the expectation, doing planning, and setting the expectation early on.
or approving a couple development, and we get into the last one and saying, oh, well, you still need your park.
Yeah, exactly, so it's setting the expectation up front, and
There's a lot of work to do before we're ready to do on this, on most of this area, outside of, well, maybe the industrial.
I would agree with that. I think we're defining a project here to go and look at, okay, exactly what do we have to have in our code, set up annexation agreements, do the master planning, et cetera, and make it all stick, right? To your point.
Yeah, and I think we can probably get back to you on if you do that. I hear the concern, so I think what we need to get back with you on is if you do an ask, let's just say it's the whole thing, then what assurances do we have that it's not just going to be, we're gonna get the next whatever, we're gonna get an annexation application and we have to process it before we have our code set up. So we'll get you some assurances or say, actually, we can't guarantee that, and therefore you might want to consider, what the ask is. But my hunch is that the city has more control than maybe I'm hearing a concern. And so we'll get you that information and just make sure that before you go for the potentially what other backstops we have to make sure we get what we're looking for.
But what control do we have now? What do we need to do to create deed through ordinance or whatever? All that needs to be in place before we bring in any land, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
We'll have to hear you tie this up in a bow before we give you a new pile of work, so.
Don't worry, I've already started on the other pile. I multitask. That's great.
I'd like to
Yes.
switch, going back in the prior slide. This is kind of my first rodeo in terms of going through all the zoning and these concepts. Is it common when you do this kind of city planning to have so many small slices of various zones as part of that? I mean, it seems very engineered, which might not be a bad thing to have all these, but like, I mean, I think it was mentioned earlier, if somebody doesn't want something on the, there's no development happening on that particular zoning, then we would just rezone it. Okay, well, what happens if like in this tiny slice of multifamily in the middle here, that gets built, but then the developers won't want to build this other stuff around it. Well, now we got to kind of revisit what we're doing with those zones, or, I mean, it seems like kind of screw up the plans, or it almost seems over-engineered, this many small slices of zones everywhere. I'm just kind of curious if that's normal.
I think that the reason we did the relook was because it was all the same kind, single-family housing all the way throughout, and the council at the time
No
said.
jobs land.
Yeah, the council said, we want it more broken up like this, because otherwise we're gonna get 5,000 single-family homes, and all of a sudden we don't have any more, because that's what has been done in Sherwood for 20 years.
And this, I just want to say too, looking at this map, like the scale seems small, but when you're out there,
What's
it's
the-
acres.
1,200 acres out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I also like the mixed, because I don't want to have a town that's all the apartments are over here, like massive
Yeah.
apartments, and I like how it's gonna flow as a neighborhood where you can have different economic backgrounds living within
Yeah,
a community
you
and
put
not,
down a lot.
But if the middle school is 30 acres, it could overlap like in one spot, 4 different zones gone.
Yeah.
Well, someone's gonna kill me, but we looked at turning our old middle school back into a middle school.
that is up to the school district, so we can.
When I talked to Jim about that, they want to plan for the middle school, but they don't necessarily know that they're necessarily going to need the middle school. They repurpose the old middle school again.
Okay,
Maybe
Something
two
with
grade
bridges.
schools.
yeah, but because the grade
They might
schools
just
could.
need 2 or 3 elementary schools and then repurpose Ridges into a middle school, and they're fine.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
but they want to preserve flexibility.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
The other thought process too, like cottage clusters, I think you specifically here, if you don't zone for that, it'll never get built. Because if I'm a builder, I can put duplexes in, I'm gonna make a lot more money if I put cottage clusters in. So it kind of forces the economics, if that makes sense.
and we've heard from a lot on the ability to downsize in Sherwood is next to nil.
Yeah.
I'm practically an empty nester. There's nowhere for me to downsize in Sherwood.
I have three friends that are all, their houses are up for
And they're
sale,
leaving.
and they're all
They're leaving.
leaving, and they're in their prime earning years right now.
Yeah,
And-
income earning years and they're leaving Sherwood. Yeah.
All right, housing estimates in the plan. So we took all of our housing zones and we have the density range here in this column. The total acres that we have for each designation in this column, the percentage of the residential acres that we have overall in the plan. And so we have a range of total average density and homes in Sherwood West. And in doing this calculation, there's a little caveat here. We use the highest density in each one of these zones in that calculation, because we know typically now that we're developing at that higher range for housing in Sherwood. So if there was zero middle housing in these residential neighborhoods, the total average density would be 9.2 dwellings per acre, and we would see a little over 3,000 homes. If we add in the open space to that calculation, the total average density drops down to 7.8.
Which is about what Woodhaven is.
Overall, Sherwood is 8.
And then so it was really interesting because the CAC really wanted to look at the implications of House Bill 2001. So, we did this little math equation basically of what the implications are. And so we looked at what if 10% of middle housing were to develop in these neighborhoods, and we get to a little over 3,600, homes overall, and the total average density of 10.6. And if you add in the open space, it drops down to 9 dwelling units per acre. And then we have the 50% shown in this table as well.
And just as a reference, we have about 6,500 housing units in Sherwood right now.
Yeah.
So this would, at the low end, it would add 50%. At the high end, almost double the size of the number of housing units in Sherwood. Just to give you this.
The other reason we wanted to show this, why we were wrestling with it, is with HB 2001, obviously we don't know what their final density is going to be. Yet Metro, in some of our mandated planning process, say we have to hit certain density targets. So this shows that we have the capability of hitting some of those targets without necessarily zoning the whole thing.
If you don't know the density, how do you plan for infrastructure, pipes?
It's an excellent question.
But what do you
Question's
have?
being asked a lot.
Yeah. No, you have to plan for 20 units per acre. That's,
You just build oversized pipes.
that's correct, Erica? Isn't that what the Metro, I thought that
You
was.
can do it that way,
You
too.
could do it that way, or you could do it a different way.
I mean, if someone comes in and wants to upsize everything, they could be on the hook for all the expanded infrastructure.
Mhm.
That's it.
But don't worry, the streets will be narrower, not less parking.
Oh, good.
No,
I was
no
worried.
parking.
Thank you, Salem.
Can build beyond 50% of the housing? Yes.
Nope, we didn't do 75% or 100.
So any place that a single family residence can be built, so in the low density neighborhoods, we're saying that 720 lots are gonna be created, 720 homes. But they could actually put in 2,880 homes if every lot went quadplexes. So yes, the numbers are not to the maximum that it could be. But was based on whatever consultants they heard from, was that it was unlikely.
And
So-
we haven't said it, just to make it really clear. If you have under HB 2001, the developer gets to decide,
Right.
right? So, and there's no accountability on the developer side for hitting some of our goals that we have for middle housing. So that's the plan.
But even the master plan doesn't stop that.
I think it does.
So on that question.
Ask the question.
I think so, yeah, there's a question on the table, I think it still needs to be resolved, which is if we do a master plan, follows state requirements for master planning, and designate certain areas for middle, certain areas for single family, commercial mixed use, can a developer still come in and take advantage of 2001 in a single family designated area? I think it's still an open question, we've already reached out to DLCD to get some feedback on that, so it's a question that we're hopefully getting answered very soon, before the hearings, we should have an answer.
Oh, good.
So we took a look at the employment estimates, overall for our different employment, designations. And we have, total acres for employment comes out to 265, and the total jobs is about 4,500.
Joe Bruce.
And then,
Could you go back?
yes, of course.
So the 200 acres out on the bow and Roy Rogers, and now where's that represented on there?
The mixed employment,
Okay, I'm sorry. And that's a net number?
that's the net number.
We lose a lot for that power line.
Power lines and the natural resources that are out there.
Can we move?
You can.
Bruce, I got a ladder.
But I want to say we might get some of that back, the natural resources back, when we do our next step, looking at doing an ESE analysis.
So that excludes the natural resource area. Am I understanding that correctly, 130?
So the 130 excludes the natural,
What is the natural resource?
If you go back to the map, there's this lighter green,
Oh, the trees or something?
no, it's a lighter purple or something, is that?
you know what, I don't have the Title 13 map here on, but it does include some natural resources.
In the 130?
Yes.
It says that Title 13 riparian is the light green.
It's all like.
Yep.
Okay,
There's light green.
so it's wetlands.
Mm-hmm. Wetlands, like upland habitat,
Tree canopy is included, that's why it's.
tree canopy.
I'm sorry, Eric, I guess I meant when you look at the
That
map,
little sculpted part on the left.
there is, maybe I can't see it well enough on here, but I thought there was a little darker purple or different shade purple along the outward corner.
So we got,
So this is a
Oh.
little dark because underneath it is a large tree canopy.
Okay.
And we're showing it as employment because we know that we have different tree canopy
Yeah,
coverage standards, so we can utilize some of that land that's in there.
so that's part of the
So
130.
we captured it, correct.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
But this area outside, right in here, we might be able to capture more.
We capture it all. Get it.
That, a lot of that tree,
Tree-
trees
trees
are
also.
cut down as we speak. I don't know if you've driven out there.
So our jobs to housing ratio, sorry, what was that?
No, it's nothing.
So we did a little work with our job to housing ratio numbers, and we took a look at what if 0% middle housing were not, we did create any middle housing, what that ratio would be, and we were looking at 1.5. If 10% middle housing was created, it drops the jobs to housing ratio down to 1.3, and 50% 0.8. And anything, over 1 is a pretty good jobs to housing
Especially in this.
ratio.
I mean, that would be incredible. Yeah, for this town.
So implementation of the concept plan here, I really only just have a couple minutes left, so I'm gonna be quick. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome, I thought I only had 16. Great.
It started 15 minutes early, so that helps.
I know it did. So implementation, so our kind of the next steps here, include really looking at some of the infrastructure funding strategies that are needed in this area and, possibly producing a supplemental SCC methodology. We have future comprehensive planning policy updates and zoning regulations that would include, how we protect our natural features in this area, doing some of that custom residential zoning for cottage clusters and middle housing. And, creating, a zone or an overlay for that hospitality designation and what that would look like. And then, of course, we talked about master planning. And then our future annexation policies. We would need to do updates to our master plans. That includes our transportation system plan, our water plan, sewer plan, parks plan, etc. And then when we look at, future transportation and infrastructure, like I said before, we have to do some feasibility studies here. We need to do an alternatives analysis on the Albert and Edie Road realignments, that north-south, connector. And then I think I already stated this in the last slide, update of our public facility plans. And then we need to have continued engagement with our community throughout this process, whether through the hearings process, accepting this plan, and then moving into the next chapter of making a potential ask to Metro, involving the community in that, and then with our comprehensive planning as well. Then, of course, we need to meet the requirements of Title 11. So when does this all happen? I know this is everyone's favorite slide here. It doesn't happen overnight, that's for sure. So I always like to have the slide and talk about the slide with the community because they feel as though once the
5,000 houses are coming next year.
Yeah.
exactly, and that's just not the case here. First, council's gonna have to, talk about and discuss, about a potential ask and what that ask would look like. Metro is the final decision maker, and so we will put together a proposal, but it's really up to them whether or not it's approved. If it's approved, that land is brought into the UGB. We do a lot of refinement planning, such as the comprehensive planning. We look at zoning, we look at our natural resource preservation, we do updates to all of our master plans. And then once that's completed, that can be, anywhere from anywhere between a 2-year and 4-year process. Then we move into, folks would be able to annex at that time after we have all that work completed.
So just to clarify, nobody can annex until that work is completed.
Till we have the
Correct.
water plan, sewer plan, transportation.
Okay?
And where are we in that
That's fine.
6-year
That's what I
cycle?
was asking.
And that's,
We are in this green zone,
No, the 6-year cycle, you said every 6 years they have to do it.
So where we are at this, so next year in 2024,
Okay,
that is the legislative process cycle.
And there's actually a mid-cycle program too, so it's really every 3 years.
okay.
So what outreach have you done with Metro on this particular design of these concepts? Do we have
So Metro has sat on our technical advisory committee for this plan. So we had a technical advisory committee and a community advisory committee, and they were with us through every step of the way, looking at our work.
So does that individual or multiple individuals, are they on like a long-term position there, or is it that they rotate in and out, or can we anticipate having that same person that's been at the meetings being?
I would anticipate we would have that same person throughout this process and for them to bring the proposal to the Metro board.
There's also been tours with Metro, there's been Metro counselors, there's been tours with Metro planning, with Metro economic development staff. So there's been a lot of.
And the word I'm getting from the political side of Metro is, well, first of all, as of this point, there's no other city considering ask right now in all Metro regions. Metro, I think they're gonna be, if we decide to do an ask, they'll work with us because I think they really need us.
Are they more stakeholder or more regulator?
They're the regulators, the regulating body to bring this or any portion of Sherwood into the urban growth boundary.
But they may have some stake, the expansion. If we do like Universal and one of our CIP projects, they may also be a stakeholder.
Yes, potentially down the road. Yeah.
So when you say they're willing to work with us, does that mean there might be money for the north-south road or?
No, it's more about, we might have more flexibility
Than we would.
than we would have had in the past.
Okay,
I'm just reading the tea leaves at this point.
yeah,
There's also another bill in Salem right now that's getting momentum that would allow cities to work with a landowner adjacent that's in the urban reserves to bring that land in under mutual agreement, completely bypassing Metro. And Metro is they're of course saying preemption, you can't do that, which is really funny.
That's on everything.
Yeah. But I think that's one of the reasons they're trying to show that their system works.
Yeah.
And that's why they really want someone to do an ask this cycle.
okay.
And just to be clear, we can do it partial. We don't have to ask for the whole thing. We can
Right.
decide which parts of it we want to ask for, if we want to ask for anything.
Who actually approves it? Who's the?
Metro
approval
Council.
body?
Metro
Metro
Council.
Council.
Unless it's bill pass. passes, then we can do it.
So other elected positions.
So we'll probably get wrong.
The only thing I'll add to that, in discussing this with Metro, they did say, I think this is good news, if we do get an expansion approved by Metro, the funding for the comprehensive planning, so the comp plan, zoning, environmental, all of that is automatic. So we don't have to do the ask, get it approved, and then apply separately, which is how it used to be.
Little
We
carrot,
have to apply separately and say, hey, we got the UGB expanded, now we use money, it's automatic, so
Oh, nice.
it just comes to us.
So
So that,
they also expanded the uses for those planning grants to include industrial and what was the other, industrial and something else.
Industrial readiness and I don't know if there was another.
Oh, it was like small business support or something like that, but anyways,
forgot the other one. Yeah.
well, we could use it for industrial.
Exactly, so we kind of know, we don't have to use our ask of the Metro 2040 grants for Sherwood West, as that's gonna come, and then hopefully we're still competitive for Metro 2040. For something else.
That is good news.
Two questions. One is, has the Metro advisor through the TAC been in agreement to our density numbers that the Metro would accept? That we're not gonna have to meet a minimum density that is in excess of what we have already planned? Because
So Metro and the Title 11 requirements doesn't set a density number. We have our metropolitan housing rule, which was adopted a long time ago, which sets the minimum density for Sherwood of 6 dwelling units per acre. I'm sure Metro is, sure they may talk about density, possibly,
Well,
in their
past,
decision.
in the past, they talked about 15 housing units per acre and stuff like that. I think you're asking is that regulatory, or is that just their?
is that their desire? Because that was when Brooklyn came in, they mandated, at that time, Metro's hammer was being wielded differently, and they mandated certain density requirements, but I've heard they don't mandate as much as they suggest now. So I was just wondering if that's,
I know.
if that's a true statement, and if we're only required 6, is the CAC's number too high for density from a council perspective? When it comes to the hearings process, do we want to keep those densities, or is everybody comfortable? It's just
Yeah.
a general question. Are you guys comfortable with?
I personally feel like, we don't have to be at the 15. I feel like we need to have some more housing options, which means some more density, but we don't need to, we don't need to go crazy knowing that there's all those unknowns with House Bill 2001. So I'm a little bit okay with our numbers being more, but not.
I'm comfortable with the numbers because we're intentionally trying to build middle housing,
Yeah,
which is gonna raise those numbers, right?
yeah.
And I think also like just the reality of the world is that housing now is more dense than it was 20 years ago everywhere.
Yep.
And 40
I mean,
years
if
ago,
we're saying
It's
6,
necessary.
but you're saying Sherwood is currently at 8,
Yeah,
and we're hitting.
We're at like
9 to 15.
And our bottom of the range is 7.8.
Yeah, I feel
Did
like,
one of those things say 15?
no.
If we have like
If they
50%.
want
of
to.
the-
A lot of middle housing things. I just want to get a general
Yeah.
sense from the council of on target for density, because we're marrying that density with the jobs ratio. And if you guys just give a general head nod that,
Yeah.
hey, the results are in line with what the council thought. And then my other question is, police, fire, library, are there any intents for Sherwood West to have any of those civic
I think
services?
my gut feeling is there has to be some civic, I mean, we're constantly trying to connect that whole side of the city to this side of it. So whether it's a rec center or it's like, I feel like there needs to be some city building over there.
During the CACs, I cut out my own little square for a civic building, but
Right, we didn't put that in.
Yeah.
It didn't end up in the final plan, so should a section of land be reserved for community civic area?
We
Part
do
of the
have
master plan.
some text in the
I
concept
don't
plan.
think we can spell on the spot on that.
Yeah, we talked about it in the text of the document, knowing that, you know, the additional fire services, library, and other community support services.
Maybe put another
are
little
included.
square like you did with the schools,
Yes,
up to the side on the map that just says civic.
I mean, it could be at some point, the city hall and library gets split and this becomes one and the new building over there becomes the other.
Right.
and
I was going back to your question about the density is, I don't think, me personally, wouldn't want to be as high as 15, but I think somewhere between the 6 and the 8 and the 10
Yeah.
range. And I don't remember.
I
What that's
I think if we were to pull back and say, hey, we want to be at 6, that spooks the horses a little bit. Like, we are trying to make middle
It's not
housing.
realistic.
Yeah, yeah, and so we just say, hey, we're going towards your goal, you come towards us.
They'll all be $1 million houses. I mean, it's not
I
realistic.
know.
I mean, we also run the risk of Salem coming back next year and saying we can't have lots over 5,000 square feet. You know, if you're not careful.
Well, we have 3 minutes here and I want to get through this last
Okay.
slide really quick. So we have tentative public hearing dates with planning commission late next month and with city council in July. Do you feel, I want to ask this tonight, do you feel comfortable with the plan that it's at now moving forward? Are there any major red flags that you feel should be addressed before the planning commission hearing?
My only request is the last 2 lines on this slide, and I've seen this in other parts of your presentation.
Possibly.
Possibly.
Or
Possibly.
consider.
We get hammered by people on social media who think when they see something like this, they think it's definitely out.
So like, consider a letter of interest for UGB expansion.
Yeah.
Consider a
Make
formal
it a formal, yeah.
UGB expansion.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
if you guys are actually.
And I think,
Good point.
I know we're running short on time here, we've got Metro Peninsula Roses. But I think what would be helpful too is if you guys could sit down and put together, based on our conversation around like annexation agreements and master planning, like here are all the things that we need to get done. That you don't have to go into detail, but here are the things. So we all have a clear list, so we all know exactly what that looks like.
In the process and at what time, or what guarantees you have.
Right.
In terms of
I think that would be really helpful.
getting results from it. Sure.
But the CAC did an amazing job. Erica.
There were
Thank you very much. And please pass that on to.
many more
Troy as
meetings than
well.
they anticipated.
Sure, and our consultants.
It was, I've said this before, but I think it was the first concept planning effort that anyone's done under HB 2001. So that was really, we were treading a lot of people, treading a lot of new ground. A lot of the staff that worked with consultants were great. And the CAC committee itself was
Yes.
amazing.
and interrupted by a pandemic in the middle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Or we need to get one of those neighborhood parks, we gotta get a bench for the CAC with all their, one for the planning commission with all their names on
What? Say for that. Nothing super exciting. Okay. Should grab.
There you want some water?
That's it. I'm running to have some water just in case my voice cracks.
I'm stepping out of, oh, you're running out. Yes, I have a computer on that. You're on it.
You got your slide up there? Thanks for going to put the slide presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Already.
So we'll give us a second. Transition, we set up. Thank you very much.
By the way, that's not a word. All the questions were.
I know.
You understand?
No.
Not a word.
I don't know. I'm gonna do that at some point.
I'll try to.
Yeah. Here? We're ready to go.
Pretty full.
Yeah.
All right, so we are on to item number 3 tonight, our Metro and District 3 update. We have Metro Councilor Rosenthal here tonight. Thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here and just sort of give you an update on stuff that's going on in Metro. I first want to introduce Jeff Kane. He's the interim policy advisor. Eduardo, who you haven't seen before, is off at a conference in Atlanta. He'll be back shortly, but so Jeff is filling in and will be running the slides for me.
Awesome.
So anyhow, like I said, it's great to be here. I'd like to I'd learn more from your questions than I do from what I tell you because, so I hope you'll have some questions. Land use conversations, let's see, well, you know that there's the UGB expansion, not the expansion. You guys are talking about a UGB expansion coming up, and I just saw the schedule. But the UGB trade was done this last year and is now finalized. It went through LUBA and they, there was a challenge from Clackamas County that we couldn't make the trade because it was going to cause some problems. That was the 500 acres that we took out of the UGB over on the east side near, well, the other side, way the other side of Happy Valley, and added it to Tigard, which is just, north of Ural up along Roy Rogers Road. That was controversial. Clackamas County didn't like it, but the city of Happy Valley was happy with it. The city of Gresham was happy. And there's a little bit of land also in Oregon City that they weren't going to develop. So everything's gone through and it's been through the appeal process. So Safe Streets for All grant, we got about $3.4 million. Most of that's going to go to dealing with ODOT roads that are now in city streets. Hall Boulevard is one of those areas, and 82nd, Powell, some of these other areas. You don't have quite that same problem because 99 is hardly a street, but we still have problems getting ODOT to pay attention to 99W, as your mayor knows. We keep mentioning it, and we want to get it onto the level 1 for the RTP, which is going to take some work. Housing investments, that's going along pretty well. We're probably more than heck, well, we will have committed almost all the money. That doesn't mean the projects are ongoing. There's projects opening in Tualatin and in Tigard and in the Beaverton, throughout the area. There's pretty widely distributed. This is the housing bond money that was allocated. We're going to end up having about 4,500 housing units built. We had projected 3,900. I mean, as I say, it's an ill wind that blows no good. The early part of the pandemic, people weren't investing, and so we got some better deals in terms of funding and moving forward with this. So that is one of the reasons why we're going to probably exceed what we expected. It's still not a complete solution, of course. The state is putting money in, as you know, the governor, that's one of the priorities. But what the Metro Bond does, and it's working with a whole bunch of different, both nonprofits as well as housing authorities, as well as for-profit developers who get, federal credits. This is a complex process. Each one of them has about 5 different groups that are involved, and that's why it takes a little while to get these things built. So anyway, I don't know if it was much of a controversy out here. We had the supportive housing services tax. There was a bit of a problem in rolling it out because it's being rolled out. It was rolled out by the city of Portland, who was actually administering the tax because they had the taxing authority, the taxing mechanisms all set up. There was a lack of communication, and so a memo went out appraising people of, well, you have not only this tax, but you haven't paid it. They didn't know they had to pay it, and you're going to have penalties and interest. But people were pretty upset about that, and so, and rightfully so. And there was just one of these communication things that fell through the cracks. Plus, frankly, this city of Portland sent out a sort of a form letter that was not particularly, shall we say, soft.
That's funny you say that because today is the last day to vote on the Sherwood High School, which is what we think of as SHS. And we're trying to get a levy passed. And so I thought,
Right.
I had no idea how this was tying into that. I'm like, huh.
I hope it doesn't tie in. Because about 2 months ago, we said we'd waive all those penalties and interests.
Oh, great.
For anybody that was it. One of the problems, of course, we didn't know, you don't know beforehand who, some of the people that are going to have to pay it, but you don't know everybody because some people have a very good tax year and then all of a sudden they fall into it. The good news is we're generating more money than we thought we would. It's about $240 million a year to go for supportive services. Supportive services, it's mental health, behavioral health, drug addiction problems, carceral problems, job training problems. Some people, so once they get into a house, they have some support for people. There's been a lot of problems getting people hired for some of this. We've had some problems. Some of the counties have had mixed reactions. They haven't spent as much of the money as they should have, and some of that's due to structural problems, getting people on board. Some of it's due to sort of a little bit of bureaucratic confusion and so forth. And incidentally, I live, although I live all the way over, almost to the Clackamas County line, I am in the Sherwood School District, and I voted for them.
So actually, about this mental health thing, we had a conversation when we were talking about our homeless response or camping policy, but could we use some of that money for even doing mental health in schools, or, paying those counselors more? You know what I mean? Like, does it have to be hey, this is set up for a particular mental health facility, or can it be granted?
It's not set up for a particular, that's a question you really have to ask the county.
Okay.
The county is administrating these monies. We take 5% just to make sure that all the counties are doing the same thing, the IGAs and stuff like that, and there's certain standards that are met. But then the counties actually administer it, and they set up the program as to what mental health facilities or services or nonprofits can get the monies for this.
Okay.
So it's really an issue that you have to bring up with the counties. We try to stay, just to make sure that they're all sort of doing some of the same thing. Next slide. The venues. The venues are driving the economy. It's a very important thing. The convention center is doing quite. I'm sorry, what?
Bruce made your cut.
Bruce. Yeah, oh yeah, Bruce.
That was Photoshop.
Well, I consider Bruce one of the big economic drivers in the region.
Oh,
to be
yeah.
Very honest. Yeah, you all know this.
True story.
It's a true story. But at any rate, the venue, the convention center is doing quite well. There's a lot of new, a lot of events that have been scheduled there. The National Education Association it's coming in 25. We had some very big events. The coffee producers thing was there a few weeks ago. So it's been doing quite well. The Expo Center, as you know, we're trying to go through a process of figuring out where the Expo Center goes in the future. The leaning at this point in time is to maintain its ability to host these kinds of events, like whether it's the RV show or the automobile swap meet or so forth, but also to focus on sports facilities. It's like regional volleyball tournaments and things like that. We've had several regional volleyball tournaments there in the last couple of weeks. The other thing is that there's going to be a strong effort to memorialize both the internment center, which was building A, that was during the war, the Japanese internment, and then also the Vanport to memorialize that in some sense. But exactly how that's going to work out, I don't know. There's communities that are involved in that. The zoo.
So Metro will expand our ice skating center down here as a regional sports facility. There's only 2 hockey left in the whole metro area to support that entire sports community between hockey and figure skating.
If
just throwing it out there.
I mean, I think it's a great idea. I don't see how we can do that unless you want to sell that to be part of Expo, because this is particularly tied to the Expo funding and the properties that we have there. Otherwise, it's it. I agree with you. We need more sports facilities. Metro is not generally in the area. This might open up a new area of ability. I don't know.
It's a year-round sport. I'm sorry, I'm derailing.
The zoo is doing well. It's also a venue that drives a lot of economic, because it's the most user-used paid venue in the entire state. Now, there's more people come there and pay money, so it's a really an economic, and not just people from around the area, people from all over the area, from all over the state and the region, and it has a good reputation. It's considered one of the better zoos in the country, and it's doing a lot. But they're starting a process to envision what more they can do, and they have to maintain accreditation, so they have some drivers. Some of the buildings are old. They've done a lot. We had the zoo bond about 10 years ago. We achieved 95% of everything that was in the zoo bond underpriced. So it was very successful, so we're moving forward. And then, as you know, one of the other big areas, we've had this big problem, you may have heard on the news about the Schnitz. The entire HVAC system failed. It was predicted to go for another 5 years, it failed. Well, you can't have, symphony orchestras can't play when it's 95 degrees. Their instruments are just too sensitive, and they get hot and cranky. And so they've been playing at the Keller, but the Keller is going to be occupied with musicals, so there's a whole bunch of stuff of trying to keep that going. It's a big economic, there'll be a big economic impact if they have to shut down the Schnitzer and cut down the symphony and some of these other things for the next period of time. Anyway, I'm sure people here use it. It's not right in your next door neighborhood. Cleanup efforts. There's a lot of cleanup efforts. We had the Rid Patrol, which has been very good here. That's always available if you need specific cleanup out here. You probably have it fairly well under control yourselves. There are two things, as you know, you have the regional enhancement grants, which we have a meeting coming up fairly shortly. There is also the, I always forget the name of it, called Clean. What's the name of that? There's a grant up to $5,000 available for like graffiti cleanup, for special cleanup projects. That's available. You can apply for that. It can be a nonprofit, it can be a community organization, it can be the city, it can even be, like the Chamber of Commerce could apply for it. This is the Regional Refresh, I believe it's called. And that's it was named something else previously, but now it's called Regional Refresh. There are grants up to $5,000 to do specific projects. This could be in addition to your community enhancement grants. Solid waste fees, that's something that affects you, although you have your own negotiations with your local hauler. We settled on last week an approval of the rate structure for the next year, and that's sort of a done deal. The arguments of the discussion was, should we go for it? We've suffered, a lot of things have suffered inflation, as 15%, but we had previously promised the cities and the haulers that we would keep things at around 8% for the regional fee. In the long run, after a lot of debate, the mixed waste fee, which is the tipping fee at the metro facilities, is going to go up about 14%, which is not quite cost of service, but it's moving in that direction. The regional systems fee, which funds a lot of the programs that we need, will go up 6.9%. And there was not everybody's happy with this.
What about the tipping fees at like Pride out here?
Well, that is partly up to them, what they do. Their regional system fee, my guess is they'll go up at least 6.9% because the regional system fee will go up 6.9%. And to the extent that they pay, they haul stuff to our facilities, which I don't think they do, they will be paying more for that. So that's all their own business model.
Yeah, and I don't know if everyone has seen it yet, but I saw the new rate structures and it's pretty concerning, for a lot of reasons you bring up. The way our agreement with Pride works, and I think a lot of organizations are like this, is we have an auditor going each year. They determine what their margins are based on factors like tipping fees, regional service fees, and all that. And then they come back, and because we have to guarantee them a certain profitability, I think it's 10%.
8 to
12%. And we've just been, every year, we're having to raise our rates to our community. And, so those tipping fees have a big impact if they are hauling to one of the metros. Because one thing you didn't mention is Metro is guaranteed is 40% of the loans.
Correct.
Right, and that was originally put in place to fund some GO bonds, which had been paid off years ago, but we still have that 40% guarantee sitting there. So all of those factors affect our rates. And I know Frank talked to you about this too for 12. So we are concerned about that. We're probably looking at another rate hike this year for our customers. And you're right, we set the rates. We also have to hear about it from our community. So.
Wait, we don't really set the rates.
Well,
You
Metro does.
You negotiate the rate.
Metro sets them and then.
From a community point of view, though, it's council action.
Sure, but we don't have a lot of.
We just hear about it.
Leverage.
Yeah, we hear about it. So, but I think what I would like to see going forward, and this is something I'm talking to the mayor bears it out, is years ago, we had a solid waste rate setting committee. It was made up of electeds throughout the regions and other community members, I think even Hollers are represented, that evaluated all that and then made a recommendation to Metro. That was done away with at some point, and I think we really need to think about going back to that, so there's a lot more transparency in that process and so on. And my understanding is one of the reasons the rates are raised is because we need to build back our reserves. And one of the concerns I have with that is because money's going into the reserves, and now that all those reserve monies become unrestricted. So are they being used just for the garbage side, reserves, or being used for other things? You know, we want to make sure that those rates that we're paying for tipping fees are just covering the cost to handle solid waste recycling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in fact, that was brought up by some people and said that we really need to separate, that we need to have two kinds of reserves. We have the reserves that generate from the regional systems fee and from the tipping fee, so that they aren't just going into the same pot. And so there's more control and more transparency about what it can be used for, what it can be spent. So, and there will be some taking from the reserves, presumably, but one of the things the council was fairly strong about was not to reduce the kinds of services that people find, which is such as the paint facility, the grid control, the hazardous waste kinds of, the hazardous waste kinds of programs and things like that. Some of these things that the haulers are not, or don't, and historically not, but your idea of having a regional systems fee, I don't know why it was abandoned, and so.
Or the committee.
That committee. But I certainly think that's an idea that's worth thinking about. Solid waste fees are complicated because you have a whole bunch of different waste streams that you're controlling and a whole bunch of different, and, you know, as you know, some of them are high fees but low volume, some of them are high volume and, you know.
Yeah, it's very complicated, you know, like when they were talking a couple of years ago when the idea of the South Cornelius transfer station came up, the Taj Mahal. There was talk then about that the 40% guarantee of trips would go up to 60% to help pay for that.
Right.
And that would have a huge impact on our rates because that's 20% less loads going to our haulers transfer station, even though they have fixed costs. They don't have 20% less people they're servicing, which would also cause a rate increase. So you're right, it's so complex. We have to figure out a way to engage in the formulative stage, all these entities in the conversation.
Well, and I think also when we were doing those rate adjustments, we looked at, hey, let's, we can jack up the prices on the stuff that are one-off usage kind of things, like hazardous waste, or like I recycle batteries, once a year, right? So if you told me, if you doubled that, right, I don't know that I would know from the last year, but that monthly charge is what people notice and they go, oh, that's up 20% again. That's the problem, right? And so I appreciate that we have all these other, kind of, I would say, fringe dumping services, but the pain is felt on that monthly.
Now, our staff will say that the tipping, or I should say, the monthly charge that an individual pays, that the homeowner pays, only about 10% of that is really related to metro costs. Most of the rest is related to, maybe slightly more than that or slightly less than that. A lot of it's related to the costs of the regional haulers and their expenses.
The overall tipping fee, but
right.
We're talking
but we're talking about how it trickles down, right? Where, they raise and they have to, and I understand that it's complicated, but that's why I think we said, hey, for the people who like the construction, ones, will put the price up on those because those are a one-time fee versus, I don't know. It feels like, again, when the end user is looking at their bill, they just see it as, so we're trying to get rich off of garbage collection, right? And in reality.
Well, and I think for lower income communities, it's a real issue, too, because, I think when in 2020, we went up 8% in July, I think you delayed it 6 months. You got another 8% hike, and we're at this hike, so that's adding up. It's getting pretty significant.
But like I said, I mean, the commitment was made last year to try and keep things at sort of a standard level.
Yeah.
To match increasing costs. And that was like 8%. This year, it's going to be 6.9 for the regional systems fee. So that, my guess is that the haulers will add that in. They have incentives to keep it right about the same level as Metro increases, because they get sort of incentives if they do, but that's,
Okay.
we can't control exactly what they do.
Yeah.
And then you have to sign your own agreements for that.
Yeah, it's just, it's,
But
if I just go back to let's get a more transparent, collaborative
Okay.
process with the organizations. And I know I just want to, say you're covered, but,
I hear that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be super helpful. The other thing that just came up too, when we were talking about it is mayors, you can, like for self-haul, I think you guys raised to $40 to take a truckload of garbage to self-haul. Our citizens can go down to New River and do it for $19. Forest Grove, it's like $15. So there's a big disparity too between what the region around us is charging and what we're charging in Metro area. And that's getting noticed too. But didn't mean to hammer you with all that, but
No, I understand the controversies and I understand how the cities feel about this. And it is what it is for this year. And I guess I'm open to pushing for the region, see if we can reestablish a regional commission to review these before the rate proposals go in, at least get some different oversight that reflects the smaller cities and stuff like that. There was a lot of pushback from some of the haulers in the city of Portland, and there was some response to that. So, and the council was a little bit divided on various ways to go. Some people thought we should go to complete cost of service, which is high for some of these particular services, and some people felt we should keep the regional system fee at 0%. It ended up being a compromise.
all right.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I kind of dominated that. Does anybody else have any questions for?
I want to know how they're creating jobs.
Well, we support creating jobs, and that, a lot of that has to do with industrial lands readiness. And of course, we sat on the Wyden task force for the CHIPS Act. And, we participated in at least the discussions at the state level about creating jobs through, investment and stuff like that. And as you know, the big push in Metro is to help the cities, and some of this will be through the 2040 grant process, which has been initiated again, is to make these lands you guys know more than most of them, and have been more proactive in making industrial lands available for development, which creates jobs. And so we don't create a lot of jobs ourselves particularly, but that's the main area is that we do is supporting the industrial lands development and making sure the lands are ready, trying to make sure lands are ready. There's a bunch of other things. I mean, I could go over here. I have some more details that I haven't memorized. Peer reviewed, well, anyway.
We get it. We get the point, yeah. Then,
We don't create jobs.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Do you have a sense on what Metro's appetite is going to be for industrial asks this cycle coming up?
What do you mean by?
Like if we came asked for UGB expansion.
Sorry, UGBs.
Remember, we got Bruce, so every ask we have.
Yeah. Well, I think because there's a lot of push and a lot of desire to make more technologically ready sites, and I see that both here as well as Wilsonville and Wallet to some extent. We see it on this west side. I think we're quite open to these asks. I think that's a good thing. There will be pushback if we lean too far for asks in this area, because Clackamas County will be somewhat upset, even though they don't have industrial lands or they don't have cities that are ready to expand industrially into these lands. So there's a different dynamic there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm supportive of the efforts that pro-thinking, the forward-thinking efforts that the cities in this district have done in terms of doing industrial land, we still have to address the transportation issue and the community, getting people to and from work issue, which is a big issue out on the west side here. And so that is something where, to be very honest, I think Metro has lagged behind a little bit and didn't have enough of a vision previously in 2018. I was at a meeting last night with the CEO in King City, and they basically said, so now you're forcing us to have a collector street through a neighborhood where we want to make houses for people who want jobs in Hillsborough or Sherwood. And now you're making us put a collector. Why didn't you think of this beforehand? I didn't have an answer for that. Anyway,
Well, on that regard, when we go through our next RDP cycle, because I know we're into it now, it would be really great to step back at the beginning of that instead of just, because right now, basically every city and county just gives Metro their list of projects, and that becomes the RTP, right? Basically. But it'd be really great to have a process that says, okay, TriMet, cities, county, ODOT, let's work together to come up with a regional vision for your plan for transportation. How do we get people like Doug who work over in Hillsborough? Beaverton, to and from work in an effective manner, when you work, if you live here and work at Intel, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes by bus. Or 40 minutes by car. So we're not doing ourselves any favors in terms of designing an overall transportation system, especially looking at Yamhill County coming in. I know you've heard me say this stuff a million times on all the calls we do together, but I really think we need to have a different approach.
And I've said this several times, is we tend to rely too much on the list of projects rather than, I don't know the process that's going to be implemented, but I think that President Peterson is also sympathetic. It's creating a process where you actually have a broader vision into which the projects fit. Because each city has its own projects, and that's appropriate, but you can't necessarily imagine what Beaverton wants or what Hillsborough wants. You can have a lot of good discussions, but they have their own particular desire and their own transportation plan.
Right.
So you're preaching to the choir here.
I know I am, but just throwing it out there every time I can. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I will continue to throw it out
Yeah.
whenever I get a chance.
I think Taylor, you're gonna ask something.
2040.
It's covered.
He's got like 2 minutes, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I mentioned the 2040 planning grants were in that cycle, so planning grants, you apply for those. The Regional Refresh Fund, I mentioned that general sponsorship. You also know that there's little tiny projects, if you have community organizations, they can apply for these up to a couple $1,000s to just get, and that's usually through the departments, whether it's Parks and Nature or whether it's WPEDS or whatever. And usually it's community groups that apply for these small grants, just little it's like a little community party to develop community awareness or something like that. That's one I don't really understand all that well, sort of a little loosey-goosey. But anyway, I think that's, let's see, next slide. Is that the last slide? Regional discussions, transportation, housing, urban growth, and there's one bullet that's left off of there, it's that tolling.
You can leave that one off there.
That's another conversation.
That is another conversation. And the only thing I don't know is that that there was there's two big issues, two big, elephants in the room. One is this tolling, which we now have a year and a half for region to figure out where we're gonna go with that, because nobody thinks that tolling is gonna go away. That's one issue, but we have a year and a half to do the governor's declaration. And the other one is the industrial lands, SB4, which gives the governor some authority to set aside lands for industrial development outside of the urban growth boundary, or basically at that, and that, we don't know how that's gonna be implemented. We were neutral on that. We understand there's gonna be a lot of concerns. I don't know that you have too much concern here, but it's certainly possible. The biggest areas of concern, of course, the North Hillsborough area, where there's land in that area, and then, North Plains is growing very rapidly and has some industrial land too. And then the other area is the area south of Wilsonville, French Prairie, that are of potential, you might say, people, industrial developers look at those lands. So those are the big issues, and then ongoing communication, and welcome the opportunity to come back anytime you want me to, and talk to you about these issues, and, and you can, beat me up over solid. If you feel it's appropriate, I appreciate it.
We're also friends.
I feel that way also, so anyway, any last questions?
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff.
Of course, yeah.
Thank you. And when is the regional, the grants for the community?
June 6th.
But is that when the main meeting is scheduled?
Yes.
Yeah. June 6th. All right, so another couple of weeks.
All right, we'll see you then.
Thank you very much.
Our work session is closed. There's 5 minutes? 5 minutes, 5 minutes, we have 5 minutes, all right.
So I looked at that.